sure.
Thomas, how are you? How's Brooklyn?
Brooklyn's awesome. How are you?
I'm doing well. Is it warmer now there, or is it still spring weather, cold kind of thing?
We're in that bipolar state right now where you don't know if it's going to be 60 degrees or 30 degrees depending on the day. So it's quite crazy.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm in Seattle, and we always joke that it rains here 370 out of 365 days in the year.
At least it's consistent.
Awesome. Listen, it's definitely good to talk to you. Thank you for coming on board. Why don't we start with just a quick background? Just you've done a few different things, but now you're doing obviously a collective, a very different opportunity as well. Just give us a little bit of a background about just about you, your experience with marketing and technology and ABM and all of those things.
Yeah, so I actually come from first a business development background. So my first job out of college was as an SDR, and I really hated it. So that's like the beginning of my story was a really poor fit for an SDR and a lot of manual work. And then I kind of grew from the SDR function into like almost like a combination of a business development and RevOps function, where I was really handling a lot of like outbound marketing and growth objectives for I work with now technology companies, consulting firms, and a marketing agency. So handling all their go-to-market and implementing all these systems now, which are all undergoing all of these, radical transformations now. And then my journey beginning with Cooperative Future and Auto ABM really begins with going to a meetup in New York run by my friend Natan and being exposed to the idea of AI agents and just having this moment of like, one, this is scary to me because like this is potentially
Yeah,
something that could take over what I do. But two, also, this is really exciting to me because what I do stunk. It was a terrible,
it's a good way to. That's a good way to find out that well, things are going to change now, aren't they?
yeah, yeah. So I think that really like it's going to take a lot of the things that were bad about the process of like outbound sales. And I think it has the opportunity to really shift the paradigm around a lot of them. And I was excited to be part of that as both a practitioner and, from a technological standpoint, I'm really excited about what the future of AI is going to bring and all the changes that it's already brought to my life. I mean, it's almost like a second brain for me now. I feel like I tried to go without my $200 ChatGPT Pro subscription for about 5 days, and I quickly realized like how dependent I've become on it. And I think it's really set to transform a lot of workflows, but I think that, there's a lot of like fear, there's a lot of, justifiable anxiety around it, especially from people who have less of a technological background. And so one of the goals of the cooperative and, the group that Natan has formed is really trying to make AI accessible, trying to make it practical, and trying to make something that, everybody can understand and use.
Awesome. Now, let me just unpack one at a time because you covered a lot of different portions of the ground. You started in SDR. Let's start with that. If you look at an SDR, there's a lot of things that they do. They first try and get a list of accounts. They obviously look at inbound leads as well. Then they try to do as much research as possible manually, as you mentioned before AI, about the company, about the person to try and understand what might be a good set of things to talk about. Then they have to do an outreach, scheduling, do a demo, all of those things. Um, RevOps, on the other hand, is trying to help automate as much of this as possible in some way, shape, or form. What's your take first on the AI SDR phenomenon? I know that there have been a ton of companies. There are at least five, as far as I know. I've tried one or two of them and I didn't like it, so I turned it off. But what's your take first? Let's start with that. Will AI SDR, I know a lot of people are adopting it, but will AI SDR in the theory and in the companies that are it, have you tried any of them? What do you think of them? Which ones do you like? Which ones do you not like? Let's talk about AI SDR for about 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, so there's a lot of talk around them right now, especially one of the organizations won't name any names, but just had a whole controversy with inflating their sales data and not talking about a lot of churn. And I think that that's really a reflection of where the state is for the whole AI SDR industry. It's still like early. It's a premature thing. It's something that's going to require a lot of experimentation and testing to get right. And, a lot of these organizations really haven't even started with fundamental things like, getting product market fit there or their messaging right. So to get involved with a highly technical process that's going to require a lot of troubleshooting, and, none of these solutions now can really be a set it and forget it thing. You run into so many issues with it going off its talk track, and that can really damage your organization's reputation. So, implementing these things is really something that I think is way too early for most organizations. And I think that if you do have the appetite for doing so, you should really do it in a combination of a hands-on with a human approach, making sure that there's still some degree of oversight between, what the AI produces and, the final result being sent to the end user, because people are going to get frustrated if they get something from you that's clearly not. I mean, it was already a problem before that people were getting messages for them
Yeah.
that weren't really tailored to them. But the fact that you would just have something like that would spit out some garble, like I got one, for example, that was trying to leverage that the company that I worked for had recently filed a bankruptcy. And not only is that like a bad way to start a conversation, but like also like that wasn't true. So I got this message and it was like, we saw, this particular piece of news. It wasn't about the company that I worked for. And it just was really annoying. It was like how this person just totally just smashed a button and, didn't look at this at all. And I think that's a reaction that's been happening in this space for a really long time. I mean, talking about my first role as an SDR, I'm not ashamed to admit that a lot of that role was me copying and pasting Control C, Control V, the same message in Gmail to a bunch of people and maybe manually going in there and tweaking one or two things each time.
One or
So
two? One,
yeah,
one.
one, yeah, first name.
No
Before they
two.
even had the automation of the first name field, that's what I was going in there and changing. So, I feel like now we're at the point where this is really exciting if you can get it right, right? Because like personalization at scale has been something that's really difficult to solve for a long time because it requires the manual work of an SDR. And so I think that there's like a lot of potential in this space, but I think it has to remain, there has to be a human in the loop still. And so for an SDR, the workflow should really look more like, having the AI handle the majority of your research and of course checking those facts. And then also maybe having the AI draft 90% of what you're writing, but still having that final review before you. I don't think we're at the point where you can just set it and forget it and set out an AI SDR and you're going to come back with a calendar full of meetings.
My question is whether we'll ever have no human in the loop. So I think the one interesting part from what you're telling me, which is my experience as well, is that you can do a lot of the research with AI. Some of it will be wrong because, as you and I know, AI hallucinates and sometimes way off board. So you need the human in the loop. Now, the big advantage is the human manually could do about 10 or 20 outreach campaigns a day. Now you can do possibly 20 to 50. But going back to my question, if you are sending 20 emails a day to fill up your pipeline, that's good. If you're sending 50, you're going to get blocked at some point in time because there's so many emails going out that some people are going to catch you as spam, good bite or otherwise, right? So
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out who is perfect for the AI SDR. Is it a very large company that has a ton of people that are sending messages out? Is it a very small company? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think that the ideal fit for the AI SDR is really that third tier of account-based marketing where it's not really your top people that you want to reach out to and not even really your second tier. It's that third tier that you're really never planning on sending highly personalized messaging to in the first place. And then making it pretty much just like a little bit of extension of what your templates would be, rather than try to make it hyper personalized with hands-off approach for your tier one accounts, because that still requires a lot of legwork from a human being, and those accounts are still going to expect the human touch. So I think that that strategy of the AI SDR is really best reserved for companies that have a wide potential net that they could be casting, and that net that they're casting is at a higher level. It's not going to dive into those nitty-gritty details. I think that leaves a lot of room for better templates. But still, like I said, I don't think that anything that the agents are kind of handling on their own right now still has that potential for those hallucinations, like you said, and that can be disastrous. So you don't want to, approach anybody from enterprise with that because, you could be blowing $1 million, multi-million dollar account, and that's not the kind of reputation that you want to establish.
Yeah, no, I totally understand and I agree with you to a large extent on that. Okay, so AI SDR, we finished that topic. Well, we don't finish it. We never finished that topic. This was a good start. The second thing that you also mentioned was, okay, now you did a little bit of work or a lot of work on the RevOps side. There's a new role that I'm seeing. This may be just a LinkedIn thing because I'm on LinkedIn quite a lot. Almost every day I'm on LinkedIn. GTM engineer. Help us understand the difference between a GTM
Yeah.
engineer, a sales ops person, a RevOps person. What are the differences?
Yeah, I think GTM engineer is actually a Clay invention. So they, started building out that whole community online of, their Claygencies. And I think that they kind of invented this idea of, this all-in-one person who's going to handle, your business development and RevOps in one unified workflow and all the automations that's associated with that. And I think that that is really a smart strategy, but I think that there is still room for, like, that person's still not going to take over the role of personalized SDR outreach. I
Yeah.
think that it's a way to augment, your AEs and augment your SDR capabilities. But I think that people go overboard on LinkedIn and they really talk about how, like, oh, I just laid off my whole SDR team and replaced it with one GTM engineer and look at all the cost savings I got. And it's like, well, you're also going to sacrifice a lot of other aspects of what makes a good SDR team a good SDR team by doing that. And I think that that's really true for like the larger marketing population in general is like exceptional people are still exceptional. Like AI is better than average, but it's also not the best. So like if you're looking for best in the field results, you still need to talk to the best in the field people. And so I think that at the end of the day, there's a room for both and you shouldn't look at it as an either or. It's a both and.
Tell me a little bit about RevOps versus sales ops. I know there are different people. So sales ops tend to focus on sales. RevOps is usually the CRO has got a team that is trying to coordinate between sales, marketing, customer success, and make it into one platform. But you've played the RevOps role, and how is that different from sales ops to a certain extent? I know that the tools are different, but let's assume you have a company. Do companies actually, the first question, do companies have sales ops and RevOps and marketing ops, or they have only one team? How does that work?
The way that I see RevOps is really kind of a unification of marketing, sales, and also the service pipelines. So, like the idea of RevOps is like you have this entire unified function of all of those things that are bringing in, driving
Yeah,
revenue to business. So, I think that like, there is room for a RevOps and sales ops role in an organization, if it's large enough. But I think a lot of what RevOps does overlaps with sales ops because sales ops is a subset of what the revenue ops is trying to
correct.
achieve. So I think basically for smaller organizations, like the idea of having one person handling all of the tools and automations that support that, customer workflow from end to end, I think that that makes sense for a lot of organizations because a lot of people are looking for like a unified customer journey. So what that does is basically enables like a high level view of that from both the practitioner and the managerial standpoint, organizing them around a single source of truth and making sure that, when customers are moving through this process, it's synchronized and it's also seamless. So, I think that's really the future of what the RevOps is trying to achieve. And I think that that ties in with the whole idea of, also the ABM, which was the idea of the unification between sales and marketing. This idea that you're starting from a high level of, accounts that you want to target, and then you're really making sure that you're cultivating the right relationship with them throughout the life cycle of the business. So I think that, from a philosophy standpoint, they're really kind of geared in the same direction.
Yeah, I think I agree with that as well. No, RevOps and sales ops, the thing that I do consistently hear from a lot of people, it has to be less about the tools themselves. It has to be more about what do you enable the function to do? What do you enable this revenue team to do? Can you help them be more effective in being able to coordinate between different organizations within the CRO organization? Or are you just focused on the silo, right? Okay, so now that we've talked about those topics, let's go to your new topic. You're doing something very different than what you did before. What prompted you to go down the collective area first? Walk me through that thinking. And I know that you went to a meetup. I know that you said, "Oh my God, this is going to change." But even the way you're approaching it is very different than maybe I would have thought you would have done after going through this. What I would have thought is, "Oh, okay, all right, this is great. I'm going to go raise a seed fund. I'm going to develop a piece of software. I'm going to start selling it to everybody." Was what naturally I would have thought you would have done. But you're going a different route. Why, how, and walk us through that.
Well, that was really, well, first let's talk about my initial reaction. So my initial reaction was like, holy crap, what's there left for me to do in this process? And I think that that's really a gut reaction that a lot of people have when they see the capabilities of AI. They're like, wow, this is really a powerful tool. And, how do I fit into using this? If this is something that can be so powerful and can, generate all these insights that, maybe I'm not even capable of generating at this point because it's drawing on such wide data set. So I think
And
that
people's experience where I don't even have it. I'll give you an example, right? I know I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to tell you this because what would have taken me at least 2 weeks to build together HTML, CSS prototype for a front end of a SaaS app was done by me in 6 minutes by just using vibe coding experiences. And I don't have that level of CSS, HTML, JavaScript experience at all.
And I'm in the same boat. Like I fall into this category of and they're loved and hated, the vibe coders. So I, have no Python background. The two engineers that I'm working with are actually on a fractional basis. They have full-time jobs elsewhere. And basically our workflow is like me vibe coding and them like double checking to make sure that everything that I'm doing is, kosher. And and
Wow.
and
That is the human in the loop.
that's the human in the loop, and I'm telling you, it's crucial for every process, and the same thing is happening across industries, and I think that no matter what industry you're in, you're having the same reaction, which is wow, one, I can do a lot of stuff faster, but two, a lot of stuff can be now achieved without me, and so I think that my first reaction was like, well, this really seems like it sucks for the majority of people because like they're going to lose their primary source of income and like the gains from this technology are going to go toward the top of the organization, the high level managers and the board of directors and the shareholders. And then I had another really fun idea, which was so starting to develop my prototype. My first instinct was to start with like just building out the entire crew from end to end, and like people are going to want like this workflow from start to finish. But then actually it was AI that convinced me, no, you should start with like just the high level decision maker as your prototype. And so I started building like what was essentially an AI CMO that does a lot of research and synthesizes a marketing plan. And then I started thinking, well, what if instead of replacing the workers, we like replace the executive team? And
That the workers are going to love.
yeah, I thought it would be a hit. So then I started doing some research into like organizations that actually have elected a AI CEO. And long story short with that is AI CEO is really good at optimizing things and working well under normal market conditions. AI CEO is really bad at like making disruptive decisions and like reacting to sudden changes in the market. So if things are going status quo, AI CEO does a pretty good job. If things are getting shaken up, AI CEO doesn't know what to do. You still need a human
Yeah,
to do
yeah.
and so I started thinking, well, what about this way of like the workers can like cooperate with the CEO, the AI CEO, so to speak, or this AI executive team, and then they could like, work kind of democratically to, shape the future of the organization. And why don't we just like remove this class of like the shareholders and just make the people who work in the organization also the shareholders? So that if, for example, like the organization becomes massively more productive and their time isn't needed, they're still getting some sort of economic surplus from the activity of the organization. So that was really like the principles of founding the cooperative. And I guess the reason why I wouldn't just go around talking to venture capitalists or anything like that is because there's not really anything in it for them. And I don't think they'll be interested. I need somebody who's like some kind of angel that's trying to save the world. That's my ideal person to work with. So, um, I think that there's definitely room for like, and the other thing too is I think based on what you're saying, and I agree with this, is like the productivity gains are so massive now that you're able to achieve a lot without having to take on a lot of overhead. Everything is pulled from an API. Your developers can work on a fractional basis. A lot of what you can accomplish can be done with a few cheap tools. Cursor is $20. ChatGPT, I get the pro version is 200, but you can accomplish a lot with the $20 version. And so I think that we're getting to a point now where people can really take control of this whole situation without raising a bunch of capital. And so I think that that's really what the philosophy is like, you know, I built like this sweat equity model that really works the way the same model of sweat equity works for founders, where people in the beginning are going to contribute. They have an allocated rate that they're contributing at. We put all that toward a sweat bank. And then when the company starts generating revenue, people are redeeming their contributions proactive. So it's like an IOU from the organization to the founding team, and then ultimately the goal is to grow the organization to the point where people can get this work-life balance that they weren't able to achieve with the typical corporate structure.
That is interesting. I think the interesting part to me also the fact that every role, you and I, we've done development work with AI, and we know how much dramatically it changes the game. Uh, CMO, you mentioned that you could do a lot of the strategy work. It could tell you what your go-to-market plan could be if you know how to ask the right kind of questions and get the right kind of responses, build out the plan and automate as much of it as possible. The interesting thing to me when I talk to a lot of executives, CMOs who are in a Series B, Series C, Series D kind of a company, is that they've cut their resources from about 15, 20 people down to 6 to 7 people, half the team. And they've been able to achieve the same, if not a little bit more, because now they've just taken what they used to pay one person for, they've taken a fifth of that and paying it for tools. They built pipelines that automate, but now they have a full-time engineering kind of a person who's just managing all those different tools. I have one person who's got a completely automated take the podcast, finish the podcast, refill the podcast, splice it into different Instagram related things, post it automatically Instagram based on the timing. That whole thing is automated, completely automated. But they have two people sitting and looking at all of this to make sure nothing breaks in the middle.
Yeah, and I think that that's great from one standpoint. Of course, I think that if you're at Series D, one of your big concerns is how are you going to pay back all the money that you raised? So, your priority then is, of course, cut as much cost as you possibly can. And I think that that's really why people feel so threatened is because, the gut responses of most, capitalist types is, these are costs. The employees are costs. And I think that we really have to rethink the structure that, the goal of business is to support people. At the end of the day, we need people with money to buy things to support business.
Agreed.
If business doesn't support people, people can't support business. And so I think that there really needs to be, from a societal standpoint, a rethinking of, one, what does the relationship look like between people and business? And then, even maybe even more important, what does the relationship look like between people's work and people's life? Because I think going going for as long as humanity has become civilized, people have been defined by what they do.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think that, that's the beginning of our conversation in America is what do you do? And I think that that's going to change because I think that what you do is going to become much less relevant from a career standpoint because, now that you have the power of AI, pretty much everyone can become a generalist
yeah.
and
And everybody
understand.
can do everything.
Right,
You don't have to say, I'm a coder, I'm an engineer, I'm a
right.
marketer, I'm a backend, I'm
Right.
a
You
front end.
become the ultimate generalist. So,
Yeah,
and then it becomes like, well, so what do I really want to do with my life? And I think that is really the greatest potential that I see in AI. The greatest potential that I see in AI is that not that people are going to do no work, but that people's work is going to become way more meaningful for them. Because I don't really think that people benefit from, laying in a hammock on a beach somewhere. I think most people need something in their life that they're passionate about. And I think that that's really the power of AI is how can we transform work to better suit that for people and help them find something in their life that they can really get excited about waking up and doing as opposed to dreading.
Yeah. Tell me, when we wrap up this discussion for the last couple of bits, what are your thoughts on being able to use AI in agents? I know that almost everybody is talking about agents, especially in 2025, and there is a lot of solutions available in the market. What's your sense? Have you used any of these agents? How good are they? When I use them, they're very brittle. They seem to be breaking a lot. And there's not, I've tried like close to six, seven different solutions. Again, like you mentioned, I won't mention names, but most of them seem so brittle that they can't do a simple thing like here is 17 newsletters, summarize all of these for me and give it to me on a frequent enough basis every week. And it's like, you're going to break it.
Yeah, so just like the earlier conversation we had about the AI SDR is I think that all of these systems require human supervision. I've been building the AI CMO with the Crew AI, and so far the prototype for the AI CMO works, I would say like 90% of the way, but there still needs to be a human feedback loop in making sure that each of the iterations of the crew, the agents work in a sequence. So they are working together. It is agentic. There are separate researchers, there are separate writers, and then this all feeds back into this decision maker. But the idea is none of these things are working perfectly on their own. So I think that really, like you said, just like the AI SDR is still in a state where it's not perfect and brittle, um, that's the same place that the automation solutions are in. And I think that if you have a simple enough workflow, that's you can save yourself a lot of time. But I think that once you become into this, like I see some diagrams online of all these different nodes, and for me, that's just like, how could you even like great in theory, right? Great in theory. I could press this button and my entire marketing department can be automated. But like in practice, like how are you going to even institute controls over all of those individual processes? And so I think actually that's really what's going to happen for a lot of these organizations. I think a lot of these organizations are going to get really excited about all the productivity gains they can get and all the work that they can automate. They're going to fire a bunch of people. They're going to try automating all the work. It's going to fail spectacularly, and then they're going to have to rehire all those people to figure out how to make those processes work correctly. Because I think that at the end of the day, like I said, none of this stuff can function on its own right now. And hopefully, the models are going to get to a point where that's possible. And the cool part about the agentic frameworks is, if you're building these frameworks now, the hope is that as the models improve, the frameworks will still hold true, right? The idea of this agent, this role, this background, these principles hopefully will hold. But the idea is that as it is now, I think that the any process that you're going to implement that has AI is only augmented. It's augmented is the way to go about it. And yeah, I haven't seen any seamless solution yet.
I
But
even try simple things, Thomas. All I'm trying to do is to say, here are the 17 newsletters I'm subscribing to. Every day, go through them, give me a summary, and tell me what are the topics they're talking about. That's all I was trying to do. That is all I was trying to do. And there's apparently this agent's company CEO who comes on, not apparently, he every day on LinkedIn, he's like, oh, I'm going to do a webinar today. And he's got like 30, 50 people attending. I attended one of those. And he said, oh, you can take this agent, you can start using it right away. Used it. It doesn't work. Now, let me tell you what doesn't work. Number one, the first thing was it misses at least 5 out of 17 newsletters every single day. Number two, when you ask for a summary, it gives you such a high level summary that you have to work on the prompt quite a bit
yeah,
to be able to say, okay, I want this kind of a summary. Number three, it misses the forest from the trees many occasions. So again, that's a prompting issue, I think, to a large extent, right? But when you look at the prompt itself, it has to change based. So there's a lot of trial and error right now, more than anything else.
Yeah, so that's exactly why I'm trying to take my time with what I'm building because I'm really finding exactly what you're finding is that like as soon as you go to make a process run entirely on its own, there's some little fault that's going to trip up because the AI does things, let's say you look at the benchmarks, it's like 70, 80, 90%. 90% is not 100%. And that 90% compounded over several tasks, the more complicated you make your process, that 10% delta in each step of the way leads to an
50%.
aggregate
90% over 10
50%. Right. Yeah.
times becomes
Yeah.
50%. It's like, this is useless.
Yeah. So that's where I think we're at. And so the future is cooperative. That's why we're cooperative future, humans cooperating with AI to transform marketing.
That's awesome. Thomas, it was great talking to you. I'm sure we'll have you again in about 3 to 6 months. I'm sure a lot of people will probably reach out to you. I'm going to connect you with 2, 3 people that I know right away. That would be absolutely amazing for you to talk to because they're working on different things, but in the same area. So great having you on board. We'll continue to keep in touch. Thanks again. Next time I'm in the New York part of the world, I usually come every 3, 6 months or so. I'd love to look you up.
Yeah. Thanks so much for reaching out and hosting. This was a really wonderful conversation.
Take care, buddy. Bye.